Okay, good morning, everyone. Before we do our halacha, we'll do a short Dvar Torah and yesterday's Parshat, and then we'll continue. Parshat Bo is actually the peak of Geulat Mitzrayim, the fact that Paro let them go, let my people go, so finally he let them go, chased them away. And we also learn about Hilchos Pesach. Most of Hilchos Pesach are listed in this past week's Parsha. And then at the very end, we have the Bechor and the Tefillin, a few mitzvot related to Yetzias Mitzrayim, Zecher Yetzias Mitzrayim. Something that for many years I've had this question in mind, and towards this Shabbat, I think I solved the issue. By the middle of the Parsha, when he begins, Rosh Chodashim, you find the first mitzvah that Am Yisrael were commanded as a people, as a nation. And then it goes on into great detail of Hilchos Pesach, how you eat it and how you prepare it, and with the matzot, umrorim, and everything else. And then it goes on to say that Bnei Yisrael were let out at the 430th year from Galus Mitzrayim, which is really way, way before they came down to Egypt. It starts the count from Bris Ben Abitarim, 430 years. That was the moment that Avraham Avinu had this prophecy that Am Yisrael will be enslaved in a different country. And then it says that Am Yisrael were let out on this night of Leil Tetvav, the night of 15th of Nisan. Leil Shimurim ul Hashem Lotziam Eretz Mitzrayim. This is the night that Hashem had pre-planned many years before, that this would be the night that Am Yisrael were let free. So then it seems to be the end of this episode, and then we should have continued on with whatever Parsha goes after Yetzias Mitzrayim. But very awkwardly, the Torah then goes back to discuss the Pesach. After it had discussed and elaborated over 20, 25 psukim of Hilchos Pesach, and seemingly finished that issue, discussing Hilchos Pesach, then telling us that Am Yisrael were freed from Egypt, and this was the great night. And then, Vayidaber Hashem Moshe Aaron lemor, Zot chukat haPasach. ובן אחד לא יאכל בו, ומלטה אותו אז יאכל בו, עבד איש לא יאכל בו, תושב ושכיר, all kinds of things, קורדת ישראל יעשו אותו, all kinds of more halachos of Hilchos Pesach, which were as if forgotten, quote unquote, before. Suddenly the Torah writes a PS. I forgot to note a few more halachos of Pesach. And at the very end of that, we have one last pasuk saying again, the middle of the day, of this day, Am Yisrael left with all their people and possessions. So it seems like doubling the whole issue. Pesach and then Yetzias Mitzrayim, and then again Pesach and Yetzias Mitzrayim. Why say it in double form and not just connect everything together? So I thought just recently, before Shabbat, that this could be telling us something very important, a very important message. One may think that this is true as a nation, national life, or as individuals, as an individual. One may think that the main connection with Hashem, or it may be also, as I said, individually based, husband and wife, or parents and children, that there are always these peaks of relationship. There's the daily conduct when you go, you have your daily routine, and that's not so exciting. That's nothing special. It's routine, normal. But then we have these peaks where we really connect to another human being. It's our wives or our children or Hashem. You have those peaks of Chagim. Chag is something that we feel very close to Hashem, or Shabbos, or certain weekdays, or big events that happen in the Kotel, a great big prayer of thousands of people come together. Daf Yomi, the cycle ends after 7.5 years, and there's huge events of ending another cycle. So one may feel that those are to get to those peaks, those times when there's something very special going on, that's when you're really connecting. The rest, routine, is not so important. It's not so beneficial to create that connection. So also with husband and wife, one may feel that when they go out on a vacation together, when they take a walk outside, when they give a gift to each one to another, all kinds of these peaks of these times when they feel really a special time, that's when they're connecting. That's when they're feeling good with each other. The daily routine is like automatic. Nothing there really connecting, really making that connection. So the Torah says, no, that's not true. First, we learn about Hilchos Pesach, all the details, or many of the details of Hilchos Pesach. That's like the daily routine. There's many, many halachos, small points. Do this, don't do that, eat it this way, eat it that way, eat it with this, eat it with that. All kinds of small halachos that are relevant to Pesach. And then comes the Psukim of 430 years Sam Yisrael had spent in Galus, and now they're finally let out free. And this is the night that Hashem longed for and was anxious to reach. And this is the final time when they're let out of Egypt. But then that would seem, if it would stop there, it would seem like the halachos are nice. That's something that's good to do. But the main feeling of connection to Hashem, the main time when we're uplifted and we feel the presence of Hashem, is the Yetzias Mitzrayim itself. That was tremendous, with miracles and real uplifting feeling of us with Hashem. But then the Torah goes on and says, it's not true. The daily conduct, the day-to-day, small, what seems to us like small halachos, like small deeds, actions that we do routinely and don't seem so special, don't seem so great. Don't forget that that's how we really water it down. That's how we really break it down to daily conduct. And again, the Torah goes back to discuss Hilchos Pesach. Again, some more details. Tell us, don't think that there's like a plateau and then it's only a peak. That's not true. All the time you're going up, 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 up towards some great event, but without the small details, without the daily details that we fulfill halachos properly, that we daven b'kavana, that we keep the brachos properly. Every daily routine action that we do builds up to those peaks. Without the building up, the peaks aren't worth anything. The peaks will just serve as a one-time occurrence, a one-time great feeling, but then it shrivels down to nothing. Don't remember anything of it. It doesn't really create a difference in your life. What creates a difference in your life? The daily conduct. Day-to-day, simple actions, the halachos that we keep one by one routinely, that's what really keeps us going That's what really keeps us burning inside with Avas Hashem, Iras Hashem, connection to Hashem. And then once in a while, then it goes again and says, okay, there are those peaks, there are those times when tremendous feeling come in, but they're only built upon the daily conduct. That's how we're meant to really build ourselves. And that's true again, marital life as well. If a couple is always looking for those escaping times when they're escaping together to some holiday somewhere, fly somewhere and spend some time together, that's where they connect. But really the day-to-day life, they don't connect too much to one another. They don't speak too much to each other. They don't care about each other too much. Each one lives their life almost separately in the same home. It's not going to work for them. It's not going to really bring them together and to have a good feeling of one another. Here and there, they'll feel something uplifting, feel some emotional, great feelings. But if it doesn't break down to the daily conduct of routine time when they're asking each other, how is your day? How is your day? What do you feel about this? What do you feel about that? Small things. Let's discuss small matters of life. That's what really makes them bond strongly to one another. And then once in a while, there's need to break the routine to do something special. But that's not the goal. That's not the main essence of their of marital life. That's not what bonds them together really. It's a daily interest in one another, daily care for one another, the daily appreciation for one another. That's what really makes them together, come together and strengthen their relationship. Yeah. In Parshas Bo, in the Parsha, the pattern was that first we find the halachos of Pesach. I think it begins in Chamishi, I think around Chamishi. The Torah begins elaborating over many details of Korban Pesach. Then it discusses the fact that they were freed from Egypt and they finally got to the redemption and they were let out at a special night. And then again, the Torah goes back and discusses the details of Korban Pesach. Why separate and go back to that when you could have had them all in the same listing? So the breaking, it's Chamishi or Shishi?
At the end of Revi is Chodesh Hazeh, and it continues through Chamishi.
Okay. The end of Revi, Chodesh Hazeh, continues through Chamishi. Okay. So why go back and speak about details over again? And then again speak about Yetzias Mitzrayim. Like a doubling in both parts of the first section in another section. Why is that doubled? I think the idea is not to just wait for the peak and wow, we've gotten there. No, take it into life, so there are more details now to accomplish and to fulfill. And then you reach another peak. You go from peak to peak, but you're on the way. You're caring about the small details. You're caring about your daily life, not just to reach the peak and wow, that's the main objective. No, I would say it's almost a minor part of our life is those peaks.
So you really couldn't have those peaks.
Exactly. They won't be beneficial. You can have them, but they'll be superficial. And that's what many times we see, unfortunately, couples who fell in love and they have this tremendous feeling for one another. After a year or two, you hear them get divorced because they didn't follow up on their great feeling for one another, affection and love for one another in the daily life. They lived separately. They lived each one to their own.
When they go out to the club med, they go to the expensive vacation.
Right.
Nice
Exactly. That's what's very dangerous, that they feel that's what's going to make them happy. No, it's wrong. Daily, small details, that's what make you happy. That's what builds up. Yeah.
You know how, you go through, there's a lot of mundane aspects of existence.
Uh-huh.
I mean, you gotta take the car in to get it fixed. You
Uh-huh.
gotta get the gasoline, and you gotta make the notes, and you gotta do the shopping, and you got.
Right.
Why did he create a world that there is so much mundane existence?
Why did Hashem create such a world?
We didn't create it that way. He created it Gan Eden, and then mankind blew it.
We blew it.
You're gonna have to toil for your
living.
Yeah, right. Why is it like that? I mean, if you think this person doesn't have thank God, the blessing to be able to learn, he spends most of his time in mundane affairs.
Yeah.
And yet we have this profound world.
Right. I think this is part of what we're saying now, that Torah wasn't given to angels. Although you're right, Alan, that in the beginning it was meant to be Gan Eden, like all holy, spiritual.
It didn't last, but that was
less than a day.
Less than a day.
Right.
Okay. Although we don't know what a day means in those times, but
what I meant is still less than a day.
Right. Yeah.
That was the initial idea.
That
was the initial idea.
Yeah, but I think not truthfully, meaning it's like it says, Allah b'machshava livroto v'lo nivra ela. Meaning that the ideal is true, that's the ideal, but Hashem knew ahead of time that mankind can't live the ideal immediately. It'll take them 6,000 years to build up towards the ideal.
My memory is correct, I think it was less than 12 hours.
Yeah, but again,
it wasn't even
that's
even less than a day. It was 12 hours.
That's true, but we don't know how to calculate at those times what it meant, hours, days. Yeah, right. It's not necessary. In the beginning, the first few days, that day there was already. We're talking about the 6th day, and this is the sun and the moon was the 4th day. But still, they say that it could be 1,000 years each day of creation. It could be 1,000,000 years each day of creation. We don't know what exactly it means, a day there. But never mind, that's something separate. But we're saying that Hashem, to begin with, knew that mankind, humanity, can't live up to the expectation of the ideal world. It was meant to fall apart. Shvirat HaKelim, that's the Kabbalistic term of what happened. When there's too much light, there's too much holiness, spirituality, gifts, good, great times, and human beings can't receive so much light, so they break down. It breaks them down. They shatters into small pieces, and then they have to slowly build up and fix everything to where it's meant to be. So I think the idea is, so that's regarding the creation of the world. But besides that, Moshe Rabbeinu, when he comes up to heaven to receive the Torah, Mount Sinai, he meets the angels. And the angels say, "What are you doing here?" So he says, "I came to take the Torah." So they say to him, "What do you mean? The Torah is ours. Who is allowing you to take our Torah? Take the Torah away from us." So Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu, answer back. You have good answers, give them your answers. And then he says to them, do you have parents that you have to fulfill a mitzvah kibud avayim? Are you jealous of one another? That you have this prohibition of being jealous? Are you, do you keep Shabbos? Or meaning all the physical manners of Torah? No connection to the angels. The angels don't have all this rights and wrongs. They do everything right. They're computerized. They're robots to do what they were planned ahead of time. So they let it go. Meaning the Torah is meant to be implicated in earthly life. earthly life. It wasn't meant to just be a holy life, holy world, spiritual only. It's meant to be taken, the messages of Torah are meant to be taken into life, into normal life. So had there been everything going smoothly and nothing to do with physical, technical issues to take care of in life, then it's better if the Torah would have been left by the angels. This way, Hashem makes us live a life that's filled with mundane issues like that. You go fix your car, you pay this, you do that. But the question is, how do you do all that? Do you act honestly? Are you nice to the people around you? Those are all, we spoke about this last week, regarding the people who disobey Torah in a very bad way, even though they're seemingly were learning Torah. But that's a whole other discussion we had already. But on the positive side, the Torah teaches you how to be a mensch, how to be a good person, how to care for others. And if we hadn't had those mundane issues to take care of in our life, we would just be in the yeshiva learning Torah all day long, then better leave it in heaven by the angels. Why bring it down to this world, almost desecrating the Torah because we sort of have to do these other things instead of just sitting and learning all day long.
You're saying that within each mundane thing, there are, not that there are, but there must be, like you say, I forget the word you use, but there must be, you must seek the godliness in that.
Exactly.
So let's take an example. So you're making a list of groceries.
Yeah.
Right? So you're standing in line at the Makot.
Right.
So where's the godliness in standing in line in the Makot?
We can find many things.
Well, there's no godliness in standing in line anywhere. People aren't believing like this, but I mean, how do you see that?
Depends. If you push and shove, how do you react to a person who cuts you online? Do you pay for everything you get, or do you sneak away some stuff and not pay for it? There are many, many ways. Are you spending your time online? If you have a few moments learning, you listen to a shir as you're waiting online. Are you helping? Can you help someone who can't find something in the grocery store and you go out and help them?
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
So we're all familiar with that, midrash about the angels telling Moshe, and Moshe Hashem tells Moshe grab onto the kisei hakavod, whatever that. My question, and I, your answer, of course, is excellent. The question is, these angels were not stupid. What was their havamina? What was their taina? I mean, they know the Torah has things, kibbud ava'im, the Torah has all these things, and they know they don't have parrots, they know they don't have Shabbat. So what was their havamina?
That's a good question. Why was the Torah at all?
Why were they even thinking they're in contention for?
It's relevant to them, yeah. Good question. So what comes up to mind this moment, I have to look it up further, but this moment is the Ramban, the beginning of the Torah, the Hakdam of the Ramban to the Torah. He says something unbelievable. The Ramban says that the Torah is really letters that make different combinations. You could always separate the same sequence of letters, you can separate into different words, right? If it says Bet Reish Aleph Shin Yud Taf Bet Reish Aleph Bereshit Bara, it said. So the letter of Bereshit Bara, you could also spell it out as Bere Bara Shitba. You can separate the letters into different words. Says the Ramban that the Torah, before it was given to Moshe Rabbeinu, the Torah was separated into different words. And what did they make out? Names of Hashem. The entire Torah Kula, the entire Torah of all thousands of psukim, make out the names of Hashem in various different ways. That's why it says the Ramban that even one letter that's not written correctly is possible. The whole Torah is possible. Why would that be? If there's let's say there's a letter missing in a book you're reading, you can easily make out the letter that's missing and continue. You understand the flow. You understand what's missing. You understand the word, and you continue on reading. But it says in Ramban, since these are names of Hashem, so even one letter missing means that Hashem's name in that word is no longer written. It's all holy names of Hashem, all sacred names of Hashem. So it could be that by the angels, the Torah was written totally different than ours. The same letters, the same exact sequence of letters, but it separated differently, including all the names of Hashem in their various different ways. And Moshe Rabbeinu, it could be that he reorganized, when he received the Torah, they got reorganized into the words we have today. They were moved left and right to make different words. And then he told them that you're not connected to the Torah. This Torah I'm taking from you. The Torah that's sacred, holy of the names of Hashem, they left behind for the Malachim. But he took away from them the Torah that's not relevant to them, that part of the way we read it today. Yeah, that could be the answer. And it says that you only received Novlota Torah. In the Kabbalistic writings, it says that what we have today, the Torah in the Aron Kodesh, is only Novlota Torah. It's only the, almost like the waste of Torah. It's just the, what falls off of the tree in Novel, when a fruit falls from the tree. The main essence of it, of the whole thing, is the tree itself.
I think we're looking for the byproduct.
The byproduct, good. Yeah, right. That's a good word. The byproduct of Torah is what we receive today. We have Torah. Truthfully, the Torah is much humongous, much greater than what we have. All the Torah that we have is nothing compared to what it really is up in heaven. All that we're learning and all that we're taking from it is a byproduct of the main product of the Torah itself, and that remained up in heaven. Moshe Rabbeinu took down that small part, the byproduct that's meant for human beings to learn. These are very Kabbalistic concepts and ideas, which we're not exactly understanding what they mean, but I think that answers Dr. Weiss's question in a way. Yes?
Are there sources to support that the first set of luchos were actually compositionally different than the second set of luchos? In other words,
what do you mean?
In other words, what was in the content of the first set of luchos that were written by HaKadosh Baruch Hu were different from the second set.
A few words, not major differences.
It doesn't tie into what you're saying here.
No.
That could have been more of, the names of Hashem that was supposed to be meant for us, that we were going to be able to comprehend it on a different level. But once Hashem saw the
way we acted,
he saw that what we could identify with, what we needed was a building block to raise us up to where we could be for to have the original. I mean, is there anything?
It's a nice thought. There are minor differences between the first luchos are what's written in Yitro, the Seder was in Yitro, and the second is it's written in Vayet Hanan. We have twice the Ten Commandments. So there are minor differences. I never thought of that direction, that they could resemble, those differences can maybe resemble that difference between being very holy on a very high level, and then when the first luchos broke, so we need to get something more applicable and relevant to our human imperfect lives.
Moses wrote the second one. God wrote the first one.
Right.
That's a big not.
Right. But the message, the content isn't much different between the two. There are some differences.
In the Shabbos difference, you have Zachor versus
and Shamor. Right.
Zachor is sort of maybe a higher spiritual thing, and Shamor is more practical.
Could be, right, right. That works well, right? Zachor is something more in your head, and Shamor is in your actions, in your hands, and your deeds. Could be that. There's also Leman Arichun Yamecha by Kibud Avayim. Leman Arichun Yamecha in the first Luchos, and the second says Leman Arichun Yamecha or Leman Yitav Lach. The second Luchos have, besides a long life that you gain by honoring your parents, you also get a good life, not just long life. Leman Arichun Yamecha, Leman Yitav Lach. Could be. Yeah, בעולם שכולו טוב ובעולם שכולו ארוך. I think they said on both. בעולם שכולו טוב ובעולם שכולו ארוך. Like they're both עולם הבא. Because we say, שכר מצווה בעמלקה. We don't get our reward in this world. For any mitzvah we do, we're not rewarded in this world. Rewarded in the world to come. But that's a different reason. That's in Bava Kama Nun Hey. One of the Amoraim or Tanaim asks one other Amora or Tana, how come the second Luchos have Tov, Leman Yitav Lach, and the first doesn't? That's the Gemara there, one Amora asks the other. And he says, the very surprising answer he says there, before you ask me how come in the second Luchos doesn't say, it says Tov and the first Luchos doesn't, first ask me, is there such a difference? Because I don't know if there's such a difference. As if he didn't know Parshas Vayetchanan versus Parshas Yitro. It doesn't make sense. But he goes to Klach etzel Rabbi Tanchum, shu gadol be'agadot. Go ask Rabbi Tanchum, who's knowledgeable in the Agadita. It's Rabbi Tanchum is the author of the Tanchuma. Midrash Tanchuma comes from him. So he was very knowledgeable in Midrashim. So he goes to him, and he asks him, how come it says this? So he answers to him, הלוחות הראשונות היו עתידות להישבר, לא נאמר בהם טוב. לוחות שניות שקיימות לעולם נאמר בהם טוב. The first luchos, which were meant to be broken, Hashem sort of knew ahead of time to be broken. He didn't want to write tov, because then the good will be broken. He doesn't want the good to break down. So he omitted the words Leman Yitav Lach. The second luchos that remain forever, there he wrote Leman Yitav Lach. That's an idea there.
That's a huge chiddush. That there's a different set of words on the second luchot than the first luchot?
Yes. That's what Vayetchanan, we were saying, Zachor, Shamor. The Vayetchanan are the words of the second luchos, and Yitro is the words of the first luchos. Yeah. They're a little different. Yeah.
95% similar.
It's 95% similar, yeah.
More.
Yeah, it's very similar, but there are some differences. Yeah, by the way, Dr. Weiss's remark is exactly how Rav Reuven Margalios explains this Amora Tana who said, why? Ask me if, because I don't even know if it says Tov or not, the first luchos, second luchos. What does that mean? He didn't know the Torah? They knew the whole Torah Kula by heart. They knew all of the Mishnayos, the Gemara, everything. So Rav Reuven Margalios explains beautifully. He exactly says, explains it, by the way, Dr. Weiss just remarked surprisingly now. The Samora was saying, I'm not sure that the difference between Yitro and Vayetchanan, which we knew, of course, that there was a difference with the word Tov, using the word Tov or not, I'm not sure that it comes to resemble what was written on the first Luchos versus what was written on the second Luchos. Maybe that's just a difference that Moshe Rabbeinu added on in Parshas Vayetchanan when he was teaching, he was reviewing all that happened in the desert. He reviewed the second luchos in his wording. But whoever said that Hashem wrote it differently on the second luchos versus the first luchos. That's what he was telling the Samora was asking the question. He was saying, before you ask me how come the difference, I'm going to ask you, who says there was a difference? Maybe the luchos are written in the exact same way. And the reason Vayetchanan is differently worded than somewhat small differences between that and Yitro It's just because Moshe Rabbeinu retold the story in his own words. And he retold the 10 Commandments in his own words, but it wasn't written differently. And then Rabbi Tanchum's answer is, yes, it was. It was written differently. The first luchos, which were meant to be, which Hashem knew would be broken, he didn't want to write Tov in the first luchos. Otherwise, the Tov will break. He doesn't want the Tov to break. But in the second luchos, that they were kept forever, then he wrote the word Tov in them. So that's his answer, that it was written differently. And those resemble.
He was a secretary.
Who was?
Moshe.
For that,
Shemayim, asking for forgiveness.
Yeah.
And Hashem dictated in the second luchos.
Right, but who said that what's written by Hanan is what Hashem dictated in the second for the second luchos? It could be that the second luchos were written identical exactly to the first luchos, exact same wording, and what we have written by Hanan isn't what was written in the luchos themselves. It's what the way Moshe Rabbeinu reviewed what was given to them, and he added a few words by himself.
Proofread God. I don't understand that.
It's not proofreading, he's paraphrasing.
Paraphrasing, right. He's explaining what the luchos meant.
Is Moshe's speech to the people.
Right. Right. Yeah, so even the luchos he was saying in his own words. Paraphrasing is a good term for that.
Dvarim is much different than
right. It's all Moshe Rabbeinu's speech from beginning to end, the whole Sefer Dvarim. By the way, we find many differences between the way Moshe Rabbeinu interprets what had happened historically in the desert and what had actually happened. There's many differences the way he retells the story. And we learn from that all kinds of things. One of the most famous differences was who asked to send the Meraglim to check the land. In Parshat Shlach, where it actually happened, right? It's Hashem commanding Moshe Rabbeinu, pick 12 spies and send them out to check the land. And in Sefer Devarim, you all came together to me and you asked for spies. You asked for it. There's these differences between the actual time when it occurred and the way Moshe Rabbeinu retells the story, and we learn out from that all kinds of things. We compare the differences, and we learn from them different ideas, different points here. So, yeah, but that's you can look it up. Baba Kama Nun Hey, I believe in Her Nun Vav. That's where this thing appears about the luchos. Anyway, back to our discussion. So we went off tangent now, but the meaning of what we said before was that our life is built of many, many mundane, as Sander called it before, issues, and we need to cope with real life, with reality in a heavenly way, in a righteous way, in a way that is Kiddush Hashem. We serve as Kiddush Hashem when we do all kinds of mundane things. And Rav Kook, I'll just finish off by saying this. Rav Kook points out, it says in the pasuk in Mishlei, I believe, Mishlei, Bechol drachecha da'ehu, Behu yeyasher ochotecha. Says Rav Kook in Zaronim, in his book called Zaronim in Orot, letter Bet, is a whole letter of Bechol drachecha da'ehu. So there he explains that we actually meet Hashem, where we feel Hashem's presence in everything we do. Bechol drachecha da'ehu. Know Him means connect to Hashem. Bechol drachecha. In everything you do. You're washing dishes, you're meeting Hashem right there with the dishes. He's right there with you. The way you wash your dishes, the way you speak to someone, the way you stand online. It's all Hashem is with you at every single moment, and that's where you meet Hashem. You do it the best way possible, so you're in good terms with Hashem. You do something wrong, Hashem walks away, sort of. Meaning it's you miss the opportunity. These are great opportunities to meet Hashem at every single moment of our lives, mundane or holy or whatever it may be, or fulfilling a mitzvah. Every single action. He begins there by listing Torah, Tefillah, Ma'aseh Chesed. Those are the times when we really feel we're with Hashem. We really feel holiness. But he goes on and says, every single mundane action that we do, Hashem is right there. And it depends how we do it to feel Hashem's presence with us.
That's fascinating, based on what you're saying. Because if you do it that way, there really is no such thing as mundane.
Correct.
It's a mistake
Correct.
to say there's mundane and profound.
Correct.
It's only profound.
Correct. Correct.
So that's profound.
That's how, right.
That's like,
yeah. It's a very inspiring thought, right? And that takes us back to what we just said from Parshat Bo, that we're not just seeking those special moments of Ne'ilah and Yom Kippur and say, wow, that's who we really are with Hashem. The rest is nonsense, mundane, simple, technical, and nothing to do with Hashem. No, if we miss out on the mundane, turning it into profound, turning it into holy, turning it into opportunities every second to meet Hashem, then our Ne'ilah won't be the same Ne'ilah. It's all building up. Every moment of our life is building up this holiness, this connection with Hashem that allows us to reach a Ne'ilah, which is totally on a different level than a person who ignores Hashem most of the day, most of the time, then he does other things, and then he suddenly remembers Hashem. It's a mitzvah he does.
That's so interesting because, in other words, people, there's that attitude out there of like, why are you so meticulous about all those details?
Right.
In other words, those
right.
details are for you people, but the really profound stuff.
Yeah, right.
You know what I'm saying? And you're saying it's just,
yes, that's the opposite. It's a huge mistake. Right? And we see it. I think a person can really experience this when they build themselves slowly with all those details, small details of halacha, of kavana, of being nice, of thanking people, smiling to people. Every single small step, small action you do in the right way, in the right direction, you feel how it builds in you this growth, spiritual growth, building your personality to be something much greater.
Rav Steinberg, since you brought up that section of Parshat Bo, which talks about the halakha, so I want to ask a question that if you say we don't have time, we'll do another time, that's fine.
We'll do another time, okay.
In previous weeks, we talked about the fact we learned Tosefet Shabbat Yom Tov from Yom Kippur. It says, and you told the story about that fellow who only uses the Hebrew dates and really,
right.
Yom Rishon is last night, not tonight, and all that.
Right.
That's very nice. Except if you look in this previous parsha yesterday, in Perek Yud Bet Pasuk Yud Chet, where it talks about the halachot of Pesach, it also talks about the days that you can't eat matzah, and it says Bar Rishon Ba'asar Yom LaChodesh Ba'erev Tochlu Matzah. Now clearly that doesn't mean the 14th, the night before, but when we do B'dikar Chametz, means that night. Until when do you have to eat chametz? Until the 21st. Ad Yom Echad V'Eshrim LaChodesh Ba'erev. Again, it's not that the seventh night of Pesach, the night before, it's till the end of the seventh day.
Right.
So that's a different use of the word Ba'erev. So if either one could be used, how do you know which one is which? When do you use which? I mean, you could, we know because we have thousands of years of tradition, but just looking at the words, why does this one mean the night after the day you're talking about?
Wow, that's a very good question.
The day before.
Yeah. That's a very good question. It's the same. I'll repeat it in a second. It's the same as we say by the Yom Kippur, where Chazal felt it wasn't the proper way to word it, and therefore they learned it to do Tosefet. Here he's saying, Dr. Weiss is saying that it says, when we're...
Bet Pasuk Yud Chet, if anybody wants to pull it out.
Bet Yud Chet, 12:18 of Shemot, chapter 12, verse 18, where it says,
Barishon ba'abasar yom lachodesh ba'erev.
Barishon ba'abasar yom lachodesh ba'erev. Tochlu matzot. We're talking about the eve of the 15th of Nisan. That's when we have to start eating matzah. But the Torah doesn't describe it that way. The Torah describes it as the 14th at night, which is the secular way to note a certain date. Halachically is the 15th. So why does it say in the Torah? And so the concluding of Pesach, it also says the same idea. That 21st of Nisan ba'erev. So again, it's not the eve of the 21st, it's the 21st at night. Meaning it's the 22nd. So yeah, that's a very good question. I would say that it comes to teach us Tosefet, but we don't. Normally, we only learn Tosefet from Yom Kippur. I never heard that someone interprets this as also being a source for Tosefet. That on the 14th, and it's not even talking about malacha there. It's talking about eating matzah. Eating matzah, there is no Tosefet because we're not allowed to eat the matzah on the 14th. We have to wait till after it says to start eating the matzah. That's why we can't do early Mariv before Pesach and start the Seder night early. Because we need to start the Seder night when it's actually 15th of Nisan and not a second before. There's no Tosefet. There's Tosefet from Isra Melacha, like there is for every Shabbos and Chag, also by Pesach, to refrain from Melacha a few minutes before Shkia. But there's no Tosefet Achilas Matzah. Mitzvah Achilas Matzah, which is what this pasuk is talking about, has nothing, has no Tosefet whatsoever. So, very powerful question. I don't know. I have no idea. It's a good question. I have to look up in the Farshim. I'm sure someone discusses it. It's a good question. Okay. So let's go on with Halach Shabbos. We're starting to chart. We discussed already this chapter of Shonei Shabbat, the timers. Let's go now in sequence of the book. We discussed some general things. Now let's go in the sequence of the book. The point discussed here in the beginning of the chapter is what would happen if a person turns on their air conditioning before Shabbos, Friday, preparing for Shabbat, and they forget to switch the switch to Matzav Shabbat, to a Shabbos time. So they turned it on. It's now either cooling the house or warming up. That's depending which air conditioner you're using, the hot mode or the cold mode. And then you meant to set it on a timer that it's to work for certain hours and shut itself off and then turn on again, back and forth. You forgot to switch the peg to Shabbos mode. So now it's going to be on the entire Shabbos. What do you do then? If you put on a cold air, you'll be freezing cold the whole day. I'm not talking about waste of money for electricity running. That nothing we can do about that. That's something we have to bear with and take the loss. But I'm talking about the circumstance in the house, which is unbearable. It could be very, very cold or very, very warm. We forgot to switch the timer. What can we do? Now that it's on the whole Shabbat, if we switch the switch to Shabbos mode, to a timer, then it may be that right now it's going to continue working because it's on those pegs that make it on. But in the end, it's going to turn off at a certain moment. So by grama, indirectly, we've caused it to turn off. And then turn on again later. But grama is not allowed on Shabbat. So the special chiddush we have here is that the Ramah and seemingly the Shulchan Aruch most probably agrees to it, although it doesn't say directly in the Shulchan Aruch. In Shin Lamed Dalet Sif Kaf Bet, 334, Siman 334, letter 22. It says there that grama b'Shabbos mutar. One is allowed to do all kinds of malachos when it's indirect. It's not directly, immediately done. The Rama adds, that's the Shulchan Aruch. The Rama adds to that, Hainu bimkom pseida. That's only true if it's a great need. Bimkom pseida is a great need, a great loss. The temperature in the room, in the house, when it's very, very hot or very, very cold, could be a great need. That could definitely fit into pseida. Now, although the Shulchan Aruch did not add what the Rama added into it, it sounds like the Shulchan Aruch just allows grama. As simple as that, without any great need. But that can't be. The Sephardic poskim, Rabbi Yosef, say that he meant only B'mkom Pseida. Rama was just explaining the Shulchan Aruch, not cholik on the Shulchan Aruch. Although in the Gemara itself, it doesn't say that. The Gemara is in Kuf Kaf Amud Bet in Masechet Shabbos, 120b. The Gemara there says, Lo ta'aseh kol melacha. That's the verse that we learn in the Torah not to do any melacha, refrain from melachos. Lo ta'aseh prat legrama. Asiyah asar achmana grama shari. That's the exact word in the Gemara. That the Torah says, don't do a malacha, but if indirectly a malacha is done by you, which is grama, that's okay. That's how the Gemara learns out from Lo ta'aseh kol melacha. It doesn't say there b'mkom pseida. In the Gemara itself, it doesn't say that that's the.
How do they learn it?
Good question. Yeah, good question.
Probably take his rule of thumb is two out of those three. That's how he would possibly.
Right. So they don't add that word pseida. I can't tell you right now. I don't remember, but I do know that the words of the Rama, that. He adds on to the Shulchan Aruch to restrict this permission to do Rama to only a case of Pseida is taken from the Mordechai. The Mordechai added on to that Gemara in Masechet Shabbos that it's only talking about B'mkom Pseida. Now, we should also take into consideration, to account, that the Gemara there in Kuf Kaf Amud Bet, the discussion there, the Gemara leads to this halacha of Grama. Discussion there is about extinguishing a fire. When there's a fire in the house, in order to extinguish the fire, you can't do it directly, unless it's pikuach nefesh, of course. It's in the women's shir years ago, we discussed this. So one of the women there was very, very stubborn to add every single time we spoke about this. She said, don't forget to say, every fire in our days is dangerous.
It's true.
Every fire.
In Chazal, they didn't view it that way.
No, not at all. Sometimes they let the house burn down,
right,
and can't touch. You can only say to goyim. You can't even ask goyim. You see it's a fire. You can only say kol ha'mechabeh yidom mafsid. Yeah.
But that's so not applicable to today.
I agree. I agree, but not. Agree, because the houses are very close. The houses are very close to one another.
That was probably closer.
So I wasn't a pikuach nefesh.
No way. It blows my mind, to be honest.
Oh yeah.
Probably the material that the houses were.
Huh?
Even worse in those days. The material they're made of shacks of.
You hear all the time, whole towns burning down.
That was more than 400 years ago. This is 1,500, 2,000.
Yeah,
even so,
but it should be kal v'chomer, right?
Yeah,
Right. Those are done deliberately many times. The pogromim, the goyim burnt down whole villages deliberately. Why would it not be then? I think another factor that changed in nowadays is the electrical system, because the wires run from house to house because they're all connected to the same electrical company. So the cables connect under the ground to all the houses. And if fire catches to that, then the fire runs through the cable and can burn down all houses. I think that's the main difference. They didn't have electricity then.
Not to get distracted, but does that mean literally, like, let's say that there's the candles, Shabbos candles, they spill over.
Yeah.
And there's a little fire there.
Uh-huh.
That means you can, without any question, go and put it out.
It's hard for me to say
No, I'm
that right. You're asking. I understand. Well, I'll tell you what the Gemara tells us. The Gemara discusses exactly that question. That's the issue in the Gemara there. Right. Put barrels of water.
That's what I'm now.
Surround it with water, and then when the fire reaches those areas with the water, then the water will extinguish the fire. That's grama. I would say like this. We had it years ago. I think I told the story by my parents' home. Right. So what happened was the cover of the plata. You cover the pots. Over the pots, you have a cover. Today they sell it material. Right. They have some wording on it or a nice embroidery design. So it's made of material. And I guess my parents' home it touched the plata itself. It's supposed to be on top of the pots, but it touched the plata at some point. And then no one noticed it. And it was hot, and then it started burning. Now it's very smartly manufactured. I guess they took into consideration that may happen. Manufactured in a way that we saw it happening in front of our eyes. The fire kept very inside. Yeah. Contained the fire. You saw that it wasn't a huge flame like a piece of cloth would be. It's made very in a smart way. So we saw that it wasn't a huge fire that could catch other things. So we, I don't remember how we got it down to the floor. Maybe it was just the beginning of it. So someone grabbed it and threw it onto the floor. And then the floor is made of stone, so there's nothing you can catch fire on the floor itself. And we saw how it was really contained. The flame kept small and burning it slowly. In the end, it was all black. The whole thing was black, but nothing caught on around it. So we felt that we were watching it to see that it doesn't catch fire to anything else, but it stayed very contained, very small. So I can't tell you that it's always true. You have to always assess the situation. You see they spill over and there's a tiny flickering flame here on a marble shelf or something. So it's not going to catch fire to anything else. It's just going to die out and that's it. So, exactly. Wood, use your judgment. Right. Sit on a wooden piano and falls on the piano, you're in greater trouble. So it depends on exactly what the situation is, but many times nowadays it's pikuach nefesh. So that's needless to say that if you feel that the fire is getting out of hand, you extinguish it directly, immediately. You don't wait for any hazardous situation. Although this is a halacha that also shows the yirat shamayim level of a person. Because imagine if you're sure it's not going to create any pikuach nefesh whatsoever. Your house is separated from all their homes. It's far out. Nothing but pikuach nefesh at all that can happen from this fire. Imagine you're seeing your whole house burning down from just a candle that's spilled over on a tablecloth. Your whole house is going to burn down, all your possessions, nothing left of what you own. And you just have to stand there and say, Zachar et Yom HaShabbos Lekach. Shamo et Yom HaShabbat Lekach. Can't do a thing. It's a huge test of Yirat Shamayim for a person, this halach, this situation. That's what it's really, that's halachically what's meant to be done or not done. Anyhow, so the Gemara on that topic of extinguishing a fire by grama, by those barrels of water around this, placing them around the tablecloth that was set fire with on it. So that's the situation. The Gemara is saying that that's allowed because of grama. And then it quotes the pasuk Lo tasako melacha, asyahu dasach mana hagrama shari. So we're talking about a case which it's definitely hefsen merube. If you don't do the grama there, if you don't do the indirect extinguishing of the fire, then you're going to lose a lot of your possession. So from this, the Mordechai concluded that the Grama Shari is only meant for when you have great pseida, when you have possible great loss. That's how he learns it out from that sugya. I'm not sure. I think it would probably not appear in the Rambam or in the Rif or anything, because as far as I recall, it's only the Mordechai. But you could always say that's how the Sephardic poskim explained it, that they meant it. They just didn't say it directly. It meant it's only Mikom Seida. Otherwise, if Grama is allowed as is, without any great need, you could do almost everything on Shabbat now. If indirect action was allowed no matter what, you could do only every malacha almost. With a summit gadget that makes it delay by a few seconds delayed, so you can use everything. There's a gramophone, all kinds of things that they made that have a delay, short delay. When you lift up the receiver, it continues to ring once or twice, and then it suddenly connects. So it's only grama. And if everything is allowed, you can speak to your friend on Shabbat. Grama allows everything that simply. So it really can't be that they allow it that way. So if in the case that we were saying before, that you left the air conditioning on and you forgot to switch it to the Shabbos mode, then if the house is getting extremely cold or extremely hot, unbearable, you can't enjoy your meal or anything, then you're allowed, even as a Jew, even yourself, not even asking a non-Jew, a Jew yourself, to switch it to the Shabbos mode, as long as it's not set to turn off immediately now. If the pegs are on off situation and you switch it on to timer now, to Shabbos mode, then it's going to turn off immediately. So you have to make sure the pegs are set on, which is, you could easily push them to the on position because you're just continuing the situation that's now. You're not changing the situation by pushing those pegs to be on situation. And then you turn off, and then you turn on the timer, switch to the timer mode, and then it's going to be on for another 15 minutes, as many pegs as there are on now, and then it's going to turn off. That's grama, bimkom ifsed gadol. It's a great need. That's allowed. And now, one important point about that, the pegs themselves that organize when it's going to be on and when it's going to be off, those are not muktzeh, because you were allowed to push them on or off depending on what the situation is now. You're allowed to extend the current situation. So you're allowed to push them on Shabbat. You're allowed to play around with them on Shabbat. According to most poskim. Some poskim were stringent and not allowing even to extend the situation. But most poskim, including the Shmir Shabbos Kilchasa and Shlomo Zaman, allowed to extend the current situation. But the timer switch itself, the switch of turning it from on all the time to Shabbos mode, that's something you cannot touch on Shabbat. This is a very unique situation where there's a tzorach gadol, and you forgot, but normally if you start your Shabbat, you're not planning on touching that switch. So that switch is muktzeh. So in order to now use this grama solution, become hefsi merubeh, to deal with the air conditioning that you forgot to turn to the timer into Shabbos mode, you would need to do it to switch it to the Shabbos mode with your elbow or with the back of your hand, something that's different than usual. Shinui, a way they're using any other limb of your body except for your hands, your fingers, the normal way. That's how you have to do it also because of muktzeh. You have to take care of muktzeh and grama bimkom hefse merubeh. That's how we allow to turn to help us out with the situation. Okay. Let's see another example here. Yeah.
So if an Erev Shabbos, the air conditioner is off.
Off, or the timer
off.
is on and it's set for the pegs are off. Off. It's just not turned on at all. Yeah.
If I were to turn on the switch, it would go on right away. That would be a problem.
Right.
If I move the peg so that it won't come on right away, it'll come on in 20 minutes.
Uh-huh.
And I then do it, in other words, I'm finding out that tomorrow's going to be
extremely,
and I'm going to have elderly people in the house, and it really needs to be, the air conditioning needs to be on. So right now, everything is off.
Right.
If I were to turn on the switch, everything would turn on right away.
That's not allowed. But if it's done big grama.
Okay, so now I'm going to move the switches, so it's not going to turn on for 20 minutes, half hour, whatever it is.
Right.
And then I turn it on, it still stays nothing
off.
On,
right, nothing's on.
Sometime in the future.
Right. So this is saying grama situation.
That's a grama.
So you're right. That's allowed. That's allowed because of hefsim merubah, or a great need. Right. There's a great need. It's allowed. There is a halacha in Reish Ayin Tet Sif Dalid in Shulchan Aruch 279 verse 4, where it says that in extremely cold weather, one is allowed to ask a non-Jew to turn on heating. That's right, because
there was no heating. That was to make a fire.
To make a fire, right? In those days, is to actually to start a fire, right? That's how they heated up their homes. That's allowed directly. You can even ask a goy directly to do it for you. Hakol cholim etzel tzina, meaning cold weather, cold temperature in the house can make you sick. So it definitely makes you sick. And the moment you become sick, it's chol she'ein bo sakana, which allows you to ask a goy to do anything for treating you. So why get to that situation? Prevent it beforehand by asking the goy to turn on the fireplace for you before when it's very cold. And the Minchat Yitzchak learns from this that it's also true of very extremely hot weather. In both extremes, you'll ask the goy to turn on the air conditioning for you. So that's if you want to.
In those days, there was no solution.
Right. There's no grama. Right.
No, there was no solution for extreme hot weather. 1400s.
Yes. Right. You're right.
That's not mentioned.
You're right.
You're right. They thought of air conditioning.
You're right. Not even fans weren't available then. Yeah. Right. Right. Interesting. Rav Yitzchak Weiss. He was living 2-3 decades ago. Modern posek. He was the Gaivid or Ravid of the Ida Haredis.
Probably have this one.
Big rabbi. No, we have it in the most of the shutim we don't have here because it's in Project Shoot. We have it in the computer, so we didn't bother buying all the shutim, all the responsa books. Some of them we have, most of them not. So his we don't have here, but he wrote an extensive set of responsa svarim called Minchat Yitzchak. It's mainly on the stringent side. Most of his psakim were stringent. It was a big machmir. But in this case, Dafko, you find the kula of his that same as extremely cold weather, that's how we also react to extremely hot weather. So you're allowed to ask the goy to put it on directly for you. That's always better, even better than grama, is to ask the goy to help you. Because grama, after all, is your action, just it's indirect. Whereas a goy, you're just talking, just speaking to him. But you don't need to make all those hints and then also make sure you're not benefiting directly and all that. In the case of extreme weather, where it's cold or hot, you're allowed to ask him directly and benefit from what he did before. That's the kula in Reish Ayin Tet Sif Daled. Okay. But then in the case where if you don't have a goy to help you with the air conditioning and you suddenly hear that it's going to be a heat wave and you need the air conditioning, then the grama, because it's a great need, and otherwise you won't be able to just bear it at home at all. You won't be able to bear it at home. then the grama we would allow it. That's again the idea of grama bimkom hefsed shari. We allow grama when there's a great need. So this is another good example for grama. Correct. Right. By turning on the switch to a timer, you need to do it with your elbow or something, or back your knuckles, something like that.
But using a tool, like say you take a spoon out of the drawer, you use a spoon to do it. It just becomes an extension of your hand.
Right. That's not right. That's not a
shinui.
Right. It's also that's called. There's two concepts in muktzeh. We have one is begufo, tiltul begufo, or tiltul minatzad. What you just mentioned is tiltul minatzad. You're not holding on the muktzeh object itself, moving it in your hands. Rather, you're using another tool to move it for you, to move it with it. Like if you take a broom and you sweep a muktzeh object to the side of the room, that's called tiltul minatzad. It's called directly moving, just not with your bare hands, rather with a tool that an extension to your hand. That's more stringent, that's more difficult to use than begufo, using any other limb of your body except for your hands. It's a greater shinui, like you said. It's better when you do a shinui of that type, that you're not using any limb besides your hand, than using a tool with holding on to it with your hand and moving it away. The difference is, לצורך דבר מותר ולצורך דבר אסור. שינוי ד' סעיף ח'. That's something, we won't go into it now exactly to explain the exact difference between them, but it's always preferable that you move a muktzeh object with any limb of your body except for your hands. Always preferable. There are ways to use a tool like a broom and things like that. There are ways, but it's less available in all ways, in all situations. It depends what your intention is, to move the muktzeh for itself or to move it for a permissible reason. Okay. Anyhow, now another thing that can help us deal with extremely hot weather or extremely cold weather, and we forgot to turn on the air conditioning, is the fact, or we turned it on, but it's on for the whole Shabbat. We forgot to turn on, to put it onto the Shabbos mode of the timer. So in these cases, if there's a little kid in the house, that's called choleh she'ein bo sakana. No matter what, even if he's totally healthy. A kid up to the age, depending on the poskim, some say up to the age of 3, some say up to the age of 6, some say up to the age of 9, different levels according to different poskim of what a kid means. But a child of those ages approximately, Shlomo Zalman said only till the age of 3. His position was most stringent. After the age of 3, no longer is considered a kid for this halacha. Rav Yosef went up to 6, and the Tzil went up to 9. So the different poskim, that if there's a child of that age, of those ages in the house, it's automatically called choleh she'ein bo sakana, which allows use of a goy directly. And tell the goy, do this and this for me directly. And then we also allow, in a case again of a little child, to turn the switch. So firstly, we said to turn it to Shabbos mode if it's not going to work immediately, or turn off immediately, only by grama, or do it directly, that it's going to turn on or off directly, b'shinui. We allow that if there's a kid, if there's a child. Choleh she'ein bo sakana. It's not enough great need. We need a choleh she'ein bo sakana in order to allow b'shinui to turn off or on the situation, even if it's going to turn on immediately. Because that's called trei d'Rabbanan, which we allow for choleh she'ein bo sakana, even by a Jew. Even by a Jew. Okay. Another section here about dishwasher, with that we did already. We spoke about the dishwasher using a timer to turn a dishwasher for us. We said better do it during the middle of the night. It should turn on in the middle of the night. We said that you have to make sure that when you open and close the door, that doesn't act. It's not due to the door that you close that can be activated later. It has to be totally disconnected from the function of the dishwasher. We have to have a technician disconnect the function from the fact that you closed or didn't close the door. It has to be disconnected from the mechanism. Okay. Now we said extending the hour of a timer of the situation it is now, meaning if it's off, to extend the off hours, or if it's on, to extend the on hours is allowed. Allowed to move the pegs on or off, depending on what the situation is now, current situation now. You can extend to more pegs in that direction, as long as it's in a certain manner position now. Besides, our Shlomo Zalman came up with a tremendous chiddush. Shmir Shabbos Kinchasa quotes him there, and I think all poskim cited by it also. He says that if it's an on position right now, and it's meant to turn off in another half an hour for 2 hours, 3 hours, and turn on again in the afternoon. If it's on now, you can make it turn on earlier in the afternoon. After it gets shut off by the timer, now that it's on, you can move the pegs to a direction that's similar to what it is now, even though in between, it's going to change positions. Had it already turned off, and now you want to turn on earlier, you can't do that, because that's not extending the current situation. That's bringing sooner a situation that's opposite of the current situation. That's not allowed. But if it's on now and meant to turn off, let's say at 10 in the morning and back on at 5 in the afternoon, if it's now 9:30, not yet 10 when it turns off, it's 9:30 when it's on, you can make it turn on 4 in the afternoon. That's a big chiddush of Shlomo Zalman, because he says the svara behind it is that there's no such thing that you're involved in a melacha when currently it's not a melacha. Right now, it's on and you're dealing with turning it on. From on to on is not a melacha. It's as if it's an extension to what's now, but not really, because in the middle it's going to turn off. It's not really an extension, but it's dealing with something that currently is not a malacha. From on to on is not a malacha. You haven't done anything wrong. So we don't care, we don't mind that in the middle it's going to turn off. It's a very big chiddush. He compares it here, Rafael Maka in the note, footnote. I don't know if this is the comparison that he makes up, or Shlomo Zalman already says this. He compares it, we spoke about before, extinguishing a fire. So he compares it to a case where a person places barrels of water around an oven or his candles when there's no fire yet. It's not at all burning. Nothing's burning now. There is a candle, but it's lit properly. Nothing, no fire existing. And now you put the barrels around it so that just in case if something topples over, you have the water there to extinguish it. That's no problem whatsoever. You're not involved in malacha now, because currently there's no fire. It's not even gram kibui, which we said would be allowed anyhow. But it's not even that. It's before there's at all a malacha to discuss. So he says the same here. If it's right now on, and you make it turn on earlier than it was meant to turn on, right now currently there's no malacha because it's on. Something that's on, you can't do a malacha to it regarding turning it on. So he compares it to that. Okay. One last point we'll do. One last situation, and then we're almost done with the chapter. 3 more parts of the chapter, and then we're done with this chapter. Actually, we're almost done with this volume. Very few pages, and we finished volume A of Hilchos Shabbos. A nice accomplishment. There's volume B, but at least A we're finishing. Yeah.
There's a follow-up on that last point.
Yeah.
If it's currently off.
Yes.
And it's
meant to turn on.
It's meant to turn on later.
Later. And you want it to go off.
To stay off.
That's no problem at all, because then
those pegs and just...
that's no problem at all, because then you're extending the off situation to forever, for the whole day. That's no problem at all.
The pegs itself are not muktzeh.
Yeah, the pegs are not muktzeh, and you're not switching the electricity format from on to off. You're just extending the off. That's not a problem. Let's say you have it off now. It's meant to turn on in the afternoon for an hour, and you want it to work for half an hour. You do want it on. You do want it to go on in the afternoon. You want it for less time. So if it was on, you can't do that, because you're being sooner, changing the situation sooner than it was meant to be. So that's not the extending the current situation. But if it's now off, it's meant to turn on later for an hour or two, and you want it to turn on but less time, that you're allowed to do now. You can set it to turn off earlier because now it's off. That's the big chiddush. You're right. That's the mirror image of what we said before. From on, you can make it go on earlier later on. And from off situation now, you can make it turn off earlier later on when it's going to turn on anyhow.
Can I make off on earlier? That's not allowed to do?
No. If it's now off.
It's set for 2 o'clock, you want to make it for 1 o'clock. That you can't.
No, that you can't.
That's the only thing you can.
Right. Exactly. That's switching the current situation earlier than it should be. That you can't do. That's the only thing you can't do, right? Yeah. And by the way, in Yom Tov, this is all Shabbos. On Yom Tov, we have another leniency. Besides all of this, we allow grama dlaka. We allow grama of turning on, not gram kibui, but yes, grama dlaka. So, meaning if you have something off now and you want it to turn on earlier, you're allowed to do that on Yom Tov. Turn on earlier.
If you said for Shabbos, that example with air conditioner, that would be allowed.
Again, if it was set
for Shabbos, it's off now. It's set for 2 o'clock in the afternoon. You want for 1 in the afternoon.
Right. The example you gave before, you're allowed.
Okay.
Exactly. It's okay, but not the opposite. If it's now on and it's meant to turn off in 2 hours, and you want to turn off in 1 hour, you cannot do it. Gram kibui is not allowed even on Yom. Right. Grama dlaka, yes. Gram kibui, no. You make grama to turn on earlier, but not to turn off early. And all the rest is like Shabbos. Right. Similar idea as that. Right. Similar idea as that. The hadlaka, right. Something more lenient on Yom Tov. And all the rest of the examples, of course, also yes. On Yom Tov, we only have one situation you can't do. And that is to have it turn off earlier than it should when it's now on. When it's currently on, you cannot make it turn off early. No matter if it's turning off of this situation right now, or it's going to turn off, back on, and you want it to go back off afterwards earlier. You can't do that either. Always making the off situation earlier than it was when you're now currently on, that you can't do even on Yom. All the rest you'll have. All the other combinations. Okay, let's just do one last thing about in this chapter, and then next time we'll finish the chapter totally. Can one prepare during Shabbat by a timer, of course? He's not turning on anything with his hand. by a timer, prepare something for Motzei Shabbat. For example, the example he gives in the book now here is that there's a pizza shop, let's say, and they want to make pizzas the moment Shabbos ends. They want to start baking their pizzas. Clients will immediately ask for order of pizza. So they want the oven to turn on, get warm, right? Get it warm during Shabbat by a timer. They set it on Friday. Turn on an hour before Shabbat ends, so that when Shabbat ends, it's a blasting hot oven, and then you just place the pizza inside, and it's all done immediately. You can't do that. Why can you not do that? Because that comes into the zilut of the Shabbat concept we spoke about last week. Anything that's really not necessary for Shabbos, tzorach Shabbos, and even the necessary things we said is limited to what normally people use for timers, by timers. If it's not so, don't start setting timers to do all kinds of things. That's zilut of the Shabbat. That's desecrating the atmosphere of Shabbat. And suddenly this goes on and that goes on. It's not something that is the atmosphere of Shabbat.
There is no atmosphere when in a closed business, Rabbi. What kind of atmosphere is in a closed door? There's no atmosphere. Anybody who walks by, the place is closed.
Right.
There's no atmosphere.
No one will notice it. No one will notice it.
No one notices anything. It's closed. The light's off. The door's locked. I mean, there, I really don't.
Yeah, I get it. I get it. But I'll tell you what, it's even the person himself. Besides all the people seeing it or not, the person himself who did it knows that right now his business is working on Shabbat for him by a timer. Even for him, it's not the right atmosphere. Yeah, he's in work mode. Yeah, but it's something of that sort. You're right. It's not something that can be observed by anyone, but that's what he passes.
It's like chumrah. It doesn't sound like it's halal.
It's a chumrah that Rav Moshe Feinstein already began. It's not the Filmaka. Rav Moshe Feinstein was very, very tough about using timers. Right, but how much? To what extent? To the extent that people normally do. But not something that
every pizza owner would do the same thing. Any business owner would do the exact same thing. That would be the norm for this extra population.
But
yes,
I would agree.
I don't want a pizza store, so that's why it's not.
No, of course.
It's not my business.
Of course. It's not.
If every pizza owner does the exact same thing, then obviously it's the norm.
But I agree, but it's probably not done by most pizza owners. It's even that is seldomly done by some people on very pressured. I know, but it's still probably not done by most. So that's what he's saying. Don't be the one that starts something that ignites this custom.
But it's committed during Yom Tov. So it was the last day of Pesach.
Yeah.
They normally in America, nowadays America, Brooklyn.
Yeah.
They auction off the first pizza.
Wow.
After
serious?
$1,500. I mean, they go for enormous amounts of money.
That's crazy.
Who knows? I only know is it's like the first pizza.
It's so funny.
The first pizza.
It's like getting really quickly a Pesach, get rid of it.
The first pizza,
first pizza.
So there, in that case, during Yom Tov, during the last day of Yom Tov,
yeah,
can you use a timer to turn on the oven? But now again, you could have used a timer to turn on the light.
Right. We said gram havara is allowed. Right. Grama indirect of turning on is allowed.
Here you want to do it for you're not even for the sake of
Motzei Yom Tov. Right, that's what I was going to say. I was going to say the same. You're not preparing, you're not using it for Yom Tov itself. You're preparing for Motzei Yom Tov. Although it's not a chana. It's not the term of hachana here because you're not doing anything. It's not your action. It was a timer you set on Chol HaMoed to have it turn on. So there's not a chana here. Chana is when you're preparing by action. You're doing action. Here you're not doing that. It's not a chana, but it's ziluta de Yom Tov, even though for Yom Tov's sake it would have been allowed. But the fact that you're preparing for Motzei Yom Tov during Yom Tov with a non-permissible
thing. To do. Normally, let's say I want to just cook food.
Right.
On Yom Tov before, after.
You can't.
You couldn't do that.
Right. But that's an action. He said that's hachana. That's called preparation. That's not allowed for sure. You can't do any action that prepares for like washing dishes. You can't wash your dishes, even though there's no malacha involved. You wash the dishes like you would on Shabbos. You can't do that towards the end of Shabbos or Yom Tov for after Shabbat and Yom Tov. You don't need the dishes for now for Shabbos. So you're not allowed to do in action something that you're preparing for. But here, not doing any action. The timer itself sets it on. You haven't done anything on Yom Tov to prepare for what's a Yom Tov. But the ziluta, the Yom Tov, is very strong here. You're doing something that you've organized a timer to set something to start working for you that will be in preparation for after Yom Tov. That's the atmosphere of Yom Tov is broken that way, even if you're the only one that knows that it's set for that.
I'm not talking about setting it up on Chol Moed. You're setting it up on the last day of Yom Tov.
So that's even worse. That's even worse. Yeah. That's even worse because then you do.
You set it up on Chol Moed, like setting up. Why would that be a problem at all?
So that's what we're saying. It's still a problem. That's what we're saying now in this passage here. That even if you set it up on Friday, and it's Shabbos afternoon, going to turn on towards the end of Shabbos to heat up the oven in order to prepare the first pizza after Shabbos. Nothing to do with the Pesach. Everyone says Shabbos. Some pizzerias like that it's done immediately. Even that's not allowed. Definitely not to set it during Shabbos, during Yom Tov, for use after Yom Tov. That's definitely not. That's already hachana. You're right. Your case now, if you set the timer during Yom Tov for it to turn on in another hour from now for the last hour of Chag, that's hachana. That's definitely not allowed. No question. That's not even ziluta. That's an action that you're doing in preparation for after Chag. That's definitely not allowed. But even if you set a timer on Chol Hamoed to have it turn on the last hour of Chag, of the 7th day or 8th day of Pesach, so that's it's improper. It's not as bad as a chana, but it's improper. It violates the atmosphere of Yom Tov. Okay, very good. Let's stop at this. Shavua tov v'lach. Thank you, everyone.
Shavua tov. Thank you.
Shavua tov. Okay, Shavua tov. Bye-bye.